Hi, this is Eternal King. I want to talk a little bit about a subject that I think I've touched on before, but I want to get a little more into it, and that's why I don't like Standard. Um, so, the limited card pool in Standard means that there are very few answers to whatever aggressive style of deck is the most prevalent. It used to be Lurk. Lurk got nerfed with Pike being more expensive to cast because Lurk had the turn one advantage. You would turn one advantage out your lurk creatures, and then you would win that way. Well, now we have, with lurk nerfed, we're on to the next best linear aggro shell. Again, in this way, it's even more straightforward than something like a Ziggs Poppy and Eternal, and that's Gwen. I really have not traditionally liked Gwen. I don't, because Gwen is essentially the same as Lurk, but it's the Shadow Isles equivalent, where you swing with creatures that then buff the subsequent swing you have with creatures. It is Lurk by another name. So you have Boisterous Host, you have Phantom Butler, Redeemed Prodigy, which is actually kind of cool as an ephemeral card if you want to do like Hecarim stuff. But again, in a straightforward Gwen shell, it's not that interesting. And we're even running things like Rune Squire and Elixir of Wrath and Mark of the Isles and Might and Riven, and just like we're just buffing creatures. We're making our creatures as big as possible with a turn one advantage and open swinging. That's the whole deck. Opulent Fourier, of course, will print infinite units to buff the swing on. And then even we're just going to play the decent chunky creature with the play effect, and that's almost very like old school MTG standard play, where it's like just a good kind of aggressive mid-rangey value shell that pushes a lot of damage, and then you play the big creature with the play effect. Very very old school MTG in terms of its composition. But again, without the kind of in the problem with standard and LOR versus standard and MTG is that in standard MTG usually has a control equivalent that is viable, but this deck is like I'll put in 60% because it is going to be above 60% win rate. Currently in Eternal, the best decks are about 58%. The best standard decks will be far and above 60% win rate, because they're just not the appropriate tools and spells to deal with something like this. When I see this much burst, this is a deck that is unafraid of pings. Well, of course it's unafraid of pings because pings don't exist. It is playing high value champs with 3 attack because, again, the cards to deal with that don't exist. You don't have the hard removal that's necessary. And you could try to meme Frostbite with like an Ash mid-range shell to kind of deal with this, but then you'll also suffer into the infinite kind of boisterous hosts and just little creatures that are going to have huge attack values, and they're going to drain your Frostbites out of you, and then you're still going to have to block them anyway. It's very difficult to deal with. And then even if you Frostbite them, they can just Elixir of Wrath and force the trade or Might them, and there's just no winning really into a shell like this. And this is kind of a cool card, so you know what, we can go ahead and print this one because I think it's fine. It's a cool dragon, so I don't have it yet. So I'll print the flame dragon. And then of course, what's the other highest win rate deck? Well, it's the same thing, but it's it's with Zed. So instead of running the Riven and the Zed, you're going for things like Greenglade Duo and Shadow Apprentice, and you're pushing damage that way. And Shark Chariots and Moonlight Glenkeeper. I think this list is a little more fun, personally, because at least it's doing something. There's a little bit of like tribal stuff going on here with the ephemeral allies and whatnot. It's not just straight up I push damage Gwen, even though it kind of ultimately is much the same thing. Either way. But yeah, those are the 2 best standard decks in the game. You have a Gwen deck that is a little more ephemeral tribal, and that's above 60% win rate with the Zed and just highly aggressive with the ephemerals. Of course, not running. I'm not even sure I don't think Hecarim exists in standard, or if he does, this would still be better. But yeah, very very straightforward. I push damage deck. And of course, Dragon Ambush is a miserable card. I can't stand this card because it allows you to get all your Dragon Chariots and all your value off of. It's basically a rally card for ephemeral decks. So, but yeah, both of these in Eternal, these decks would not be that good. There are so many tools. There's so many pings. There's so many ways to counter this. Like you're not going to main Green Glade Duo. You think about like Blade Dance. Blade Dance mains 3 Green Glade Duo, and that deck wins about 52% of the time. It's a rally deck with ephemerals, similar to this, in a different shell and a different region combination. But it's using Sandmen and Blades to achieve a similar effect of big damage and big rallies and things like that. And it wins 52% of the time. Because again, you see a Green Glade Duo, you Vile Feast. It's just straightforward as that, or you Mystic Shot it. So the tools exist in Eternal, and that's why I like Eternal, because again, if the tools exist, then the game is fun. If a deck exists, like Lurk, like Gwen, that is simply better than everything else by 10 or 12%, because the tools don't exist, that isn't fun for me. So that's why I don't love Standard in LOR. Standard in MTG has been fine when there are good sets printed, kind of pre-War of the Spark, that sort of thing, or just kind of War of the Spark being at the tail end of what was good about it, MTG, or earlier than that with Dominaria, like OG Dominaria and things like that. That was fun MTG because again, Standard was distinct and memorable. There was aggro decks, there was control decks. You have that good balance of prints, but LOR doesn't have that. Standard is always going to be dominated by whatever the best aggro shell is, aggressive shell, and it'll be dominating more than Eternal, where there are cards to deal with it. Ziggs Poppy is 58%. This deck will be like 62%, right? And again, that's because people haven't quite made the adjustment yet to Ziggs Poppy. I'll show off a video recently about kind of how the new ramp list is like all pings and board clears, and then people are trying to make that hard adjustment. But again, in Standard, there is no adjustment to be made because the cards do not exist, and that's kind of frustrating for me. So yeah, that's why I hate Standard. I still play it now and then because there are cards that I like to play. I like Eloy Jarvan. I like Shen. There are some nice synergy style decks that are fun. But stuff like this, I see this and I'm like, this is a Lurk deck. Like, this is a Lurk deck by a different name. Big open swings, big rallies. And then you have the Riven version, which is the exact same thing but with more burst. And they're both doing exceptionally well. It's like, which Gwen deck do you like more? I can't wait to see. So yeah, this is Eternal King signing out, but Standard sucks. Everyone knows that.